On the other side of the coin, while Joe Biden is commuting sentences and granting pardons to killers of children and drug dealers, his own family, and issuing preemptive pardons, Donald Trump is issuing pardons of his own to many people who were convicted or awaiting trial based upon the events of January 6, 2021. And this has created a career resurgence for those talking heads on the left, like Jim Acosta and others, who are crying and wailing and bitching and moaning about all things Trump and how Trump is the bad guy. Even in light of all these bad pardons that barely batted an eye, they barely batted an eyelash at this, pal.
Get your shit together.
And I don't know why people aren't just seeing the hypocrisy of this buffoonery here.
So I think they are. I don't think Donald Trump won, right? Donald Trump wasn't pussyfooting around with what he was going to do about January 6th, right? He said what he was going to do, and he won. He won a majority of the popular vote. So CNN and MSNBC and the Democrats can keep on crying about January 6th. The American people know it doesn't even pop on the charts during the election time of a top issue for anyone, right? It was by definition, January 6th was a mostly peaceful protest.
I see what you did there.
Did they go over the line? Yes. We've said it here. The first wave of people that broke into the Capitol, completely over the line. But what's the penalty for that? What is the penalty for destroying a little government property, which we watched happen throughout the whole summer of 2020? What is the penalty for a little destruction of public property and trespassing? Is it 3 years in jail? Is it 10 years in jail? These people were mostly convicted or bullied to plead guilty on obstruction of an official proceeding, a law that had nothing to do with what they were charged with. It's a law that was designed for if during an investigation, if you destroy paperwork during the investigation. It was a white collar crime law that they misinterpreted. The Supreme Court ruled that cannot be used against January 6ers. So, by the way, and I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. So what happened after the Supreme Court struck down that charge on all the January 6th defendants? They all got resentenced. And instead of the sentencing reflecting the misdemeanor charges of like trespassing or whatever it was, and them being served concurrently, when they got resentenced, in a lot of cases, they were sentenced to consecutive one-year terms for two federal misdemeanors, so they would still get a 2 or 3 year sentence, even though the primary charge was thrown out by the Supreme Court. This whole thing was a hoax from beginning to end. Mostly peaceful protest. Prove me wrong.
I mean, yeah, mostly peaceful protest. We used that for the Summer of Love and BLM, and that certainly didn't get any similar justice, quote unquote, out of that. And to me, the problem with talking about these January 6th cases is they all get lumped together, right? There were violent people there that were destroying property and actively interfering, like you said. And then there were others who got caught up in this moment, who had their lives turned upside down, who had their families' lives turned upside down with federal search warrants and different allegations and being lumped into the portion of these people that were committing violent acts, who will never get that time back again. Yet the discussion around January 6th is simply shock and horror from the left, and they keep lumping in everybody into the same group. If you were just there, you were a violent insurrectionist, according to the left. And that's reflected in this discussion with Jim Acosta, who, like I said, I have him on the screen right now. He's seeing a career resurgence since Donald Trump is back in town and running things. And I think he's talking with Congressman Burchett about the Trump pardons for these January 6 defendants and those who were convicted and those who were awaiting charges. Listen to the hyperbole of Acosta here in this interview. It's like it just happened yesterday to him. It's so palpable, and his righteous indignation is just completely over the top.
You defend what Donald Trump did, releasing these people from prison, pardoning them, commuting their sentences? Yes or no?
Again, what I just said, he's asking about all of them, lumping them all together. Do you agree with these pardons, yes or no? How can anyone answer that without knowing the facts of each single individual that received a pardon?
I would just say yes. All of them.
Well, Burchett does not have the strength of character that you have, my friend. He waffles and equivocates, and he basically worries himself into a corner. And Acosta, say what you want about him being a hack and all that. He knows what he's doing in these. He senses weakness. He knows when he has his prey in front of him.
It was the last person to leave the Capitol grounds, the floor of the Capitol, last member of Congress on January 6th when all this went down. I was offended as anybody. If they crossed those barriers, they were breaking the law. But you got to realize, too, they were charged under federal law. Many of them never even saw their day in court and were sitting in a jail cell. So the whole thing is
Congressman,
bad news. But you also
Congressman, I asked you a yes or no question. Do you agree with President Trump's decision to pardon these violent people and releasing them from jail?
Okay, bad question by Acosta there, in my opinion, because now he's only narrowing it down to the violent people. Well, who are the violent people? We know some were convicted. We know some weren't. If you want to just say all violent people shouldn't have gotten a pardon, okay, but Joe Biden pardoned a child killer.
Yeah,
where's the segment of the interview about that?
Yeah, and what's the appropriate sentence for violence, right? Violence goes from, according to the left, words, all the way up to killing someone, right? So what's the appropriate sentence for shaking a barricade and a cop sprained his thumb? How many years in jail do you get for that, right? Talk to the NYPD. How often they're getting into fights with perps and they never get prosecuted, the criminals there, right? How many people got prosecuted when they were throwing firebombs at St. John's Church in front of the White House and hurting Secret Service agents and Park Police? How many of those people got prosecuted for violence then? And if they did, what was the appropriate sentence, right? Never accept the premise of these guys' questions, ever.
How many people were convicted and given a similar sentence for firebombing a federal courthouse in Portland, Oregon? I mean, you want to talk about federal land? That seems pretty apt. How many people were convicted or even charged at this point for showing up before Supreme Court justices' houses, trying to break in with burglary tools that were intended to break into the house and then bring harm to those justices?
How many non-violent offenders or accused spent time in pretrial confinement in this age of no cash bail, right? How many of those people for nonviolent offenses are sitting in a DC jail for years waiting for a trial in the age of no cash bail and the pressure for a speedy trial, right? How many of those people are there, Jim?
Let's see what happens with Burchett's answer here.
If they were truly violent, no. But do I know that they were? I don't know that.
What do you mean you don't know that? We're showing the footage on the air right now. Congressman, you were there that day. There are offenders on January 6th who violently beat police officers. There are offenders who are convicted of seditious conspiracy. That is the truth.
This is a political world, Jim, and I don't remember you all on CNN condemning Joe Biden for commuting the sentences of murderers and child molesters, which he did. And you all
Congressman, I'm not asking you about that. Congressman, we talked about Joe Biden's pardons.
You never do,
Congressman,
Jim.
we did talk about it. We talked about Joe Biden's pardons.
Oh, Jim, you did not. You all read your report from the Democrat National Committee, as you always do, and you attack
absolutely
Americans.
False. Congressman, are you going to respond and say whether or not it is right to let these people out of jail?
I don't know if it is or not. I'm not a lawyer, but I'll tell you what isn't right.
You're a congressman. You're a member of Congress. You're an elected official. Take a stand.
They were not given due process. I told you if they crossed the line, they were trespassers. Should they rot in jail for the rest of their lives in a federal penitentiary and never be charged?
Beating police officer, tasing police officers,
Jim,
seditious conspiracy.
What you're forgetting to say is the ones that he didn't release. Why did he not release those? There are several that he did. This blanket thing you're all talking about is not a blanket. It's not a blanket pardon. There were several that he didn't for those very same reasons. Why are you not focusing on them?
Congressman, we're talking about the leader of the Oath Keepers, the leader of the Proud Boys. They should be released from prison?
Well, let's talk about Enrique Tarrio for a second, who wasn't even in D.C. on January 6th. Yet he was sentenced for conspiracy, I believe it was, serving multiple years, and I'm trying to get the rationale of that. Why shouldn't Enrique Tarrio be granted a commutation of his sentence or a pardon or whatever it was here? Well, I don't get why he should rot in jail, according to Jim Acosta, yet he's completely avoiding discussing the murderers and, the child killer we saw as well. I'm focused on that one. But all of the violent criminals that Joe Biden released, not to mention the preemptive pardons we had just talked about.
Well, Enrique, who happens to be Cuban, was accused, not officially, right, because he got charged with seditious conspiracy, which is a bogus charge. He wasn't even there. He was accused for a while of being a non-white leader of the white supremacist group called the Proud Boys, which is so astonishingly absurd that it has to be mentioned now, right? That's why he wound up getting like a 20-year sentence. Who knows what evidence they had against him? Seditious conspiracy. Do I think the government sucks and that they should get slapped around figuratively, maybe? Yeah, if I type that out in a text and the FBI intercepts it, I can be charged with seditious conspiracy with the other person that I was going back and forth with, right? So that's a bogus charge. They went after him because they think the Proud Boys was a white supremacist group. Spoiler alert, a lot of their members are not white, dummies.
I am now deleting every text that Galloway has sent me in the past year, just to make sure I don't get caught up in a conspiracy charge. Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show.
Whatever happened to Back the Blue? I want to show this. The Fraternal Order of Police, another police organization out there, the International Organization of Police Chiefs. If we can show that up on screen, that would be great. They both say that what President Trump did is wrong. They're deeply discouraged by these pardons. And I want to ask you,
Jim, if they broke the law, they ought to be in jail. If they broke the law, they ought to be in jail.
Okay,
you spring this stuff on me. I don't know. I haven't seen the tapes of these individuals of what they did.
What happened to Back the Blue? What happened to backing police officers? Your party has said time and again, we back the blue. It sounds like you let down the blue. You're betraying the blue.
Jim, why don't you just give an editorial and not let me come on?
Sick burn.
Look, what happened in the last 4 years with police? What happened with all the riots that took place all across the country? Police officers were murdered. Courthouses were burned. Over 22 police cars were burned. Yet no one went to jail for that. Where's your crocodile tears for that?
No, Congressman, you're engaging in a game. You're engaging in a game of whataboutism. People were obviously prosecuted after those
every day. Every day, all you've done is
what we're doing at CNN. We didn't storm the Capitol. These people did, and President Trump let them out of jail. Why not just say, you were wrong, Mr. President? Say it. Why can't you say it?
Jim, as I said, individually, I don't know the case, but on several he did not release from jail. Why are you not putting the story out on that and saying it's a blanket? Show me the tapes of these individuals beating police officers.
We're showing it right now.
Yeah, we can really identify in these videos who's who and what they're doing. Burchett is kind of correct here in saying that show me an individual example you want to talk about, and let's talk about it. But Jim Acosta wants to do a blanket statement, talking about Back the Blue and all this stuff, talking in absolute. I believe it was the great warrior poet Obi-Wan Kenobi who said,
"Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Only the bad guys see things in black and white and doesn't recognize the gradation of issues that are being lumped together by the media here into one giant mess of a story."
Yeah. Burchett's a good guy. Let me just start with that. But he's in over his head here. He's not one of the most aggressive people we have, right? You don't get sucked into these conversations with these people. You go in there with some facts and some talking points, and you turn around every question on them, right? Why was the January 6th committee, why did they all get pardons? And why did they delete all the evidence that they collected? Why? Because it turns out that not all police are good guys, and they don't all act the right way all the time. Now, I love the police, but during the January 6th committee hearings, especially some of the closed door ones, it was revealed, and Tucker Carlson did a great job of documenting a lot of this, that The police fired tear gas into crowds that could not disperse, right? Riling them up and causing confrontations. A lot of the videos that CNN is showing are showing police hitting people with sticks. Were some of the January 6th people somewhat violent? Yes. The only person killed on January 6th was Ashley Babbitt at the hands of Capitol Police Officer Michael Byrd. That's the only one, right? So if you want to talk about violence, let's talk about that, right? I don't want to talk about people who are rocking barricades and they got sentenced. They did time in jail. You can go and slap an NYPD officer in the face tonight and you will not spend time on Rikers Island waiting for your trial. You will be released on no cash bail. And if the DA decides to prosecute you, you will not do as much time as any one of those January 6th defendants. Period. What's next, Acosta? Next question.
Well, believe it or not, Jim Acosta is the prototypical hack. I actually use him as a case study in my book, Shucks, Screws, Lies, and Scoundrels, a field guide to identifying political buffoons, available right now on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, and other online bookstores, also available at shop.buffoonoftheweek.com.
This guy is a grifter.
I just want to read something here about Acosta's tactics, because you saw the framing that he was doing here. He was creating his own personal narrative that he wanted to stick to, very narrow. Didn't want to talk about J6 in its totality, as you just did, Ross, talking about what the J6 committee did, testimony behind closed doors, what was released, what wasn't released, the novel theories of criminality that came from federal prosecutors on all this. He wanted to keep the scope of the discussion very narrow, and that was intentional, because that is the narrative that is the light most favorable to Democrats. Now, so there's a quote here in the book talking about Jim Acosta. This is from Acosta's own book, by the way. Listen to the dramatics of this. Talking about Donald Trump. I'll never forget what I saw on the campaign trail and what I have witnessed covering the Trump presidency. Even now, more than 2 years into his presidency, that's when he wrote the book, it's still shocking to remember Trump as a presidential candidate saying he could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and get away with it. It's still shocking to remember him describing Mexican undocumented immigrants as rapists and still escaping the kind of accountability that would have knocked anyone else out of the race. This is a man with a grudge, against all things Trump, has had it since 2015. Jim Acosta, though, he doesn't have, he has some unclean hands as well. This is a statement, I believe, from a fellow journalist. His name is Frank Miele, talking about Jim Acosta. Pardon me for not joining the journalistic pack and defending the divine right of reporters like Acosta to act as buffoonishly as possible without suffering consequences. I know that is the response de rigueur for editors when someone like Acosta goes out of bounds. But I bring nearly 4 decades of experience in community journalism to the table, and to me, Acosta is just one more self-important reporter who gives a bad name to the hardworking journalists who take their job more seriously than their haircut. Jim Acosta loves his beautiful narratives. He loves pushing them. And wouldn't you know it, he was relegated to a weekend show during the Biden years. And here he is coming back to the forefront of CNN's coverage of Donald Trump. I'm shocked. This is my shocked face right here. If you like that clip from our new show, Behind Enemy Lines, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any other shows, and tune in live every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.